Hello, my name is Kian. I just finished my first year of medical school, so if you're interested in a realistic sort of vlog series on what medical school is really like, you should check out my first year medical school playlist. Anyways, today's video is not about that. Today's video is about how I use Anki. So I have been using Anki for the past 2.5 years. I've really been refining my process to make it more efficient, and so today I'm going to be sharing my methods. This video is going to be broken down into 5 parts, so I will leave timestamps below so that you can skip around to the part that is most useful to you. I'm editing my video, and I realized that what some of you may have meant when they were like, how do you use Anki, was literally like the technical aspects of how do I create my basic cards?
How do I create my closed cards? How do I create image occlusion cards? How do I import diagrams and images? How do I do my hand drawings and put them into Anki?
So if that is what you came here for, then just skip ahead and I will have a full screen recording and kind of like a computer tutorial on how I use Anki. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of the video. The first part is going to be what is Anki. Second part is going to be why I choose Anki over other similar software such as Quizlet. Third is going to be where Anki fits in my overall study routine. Fourth is going to be how I actually make my cards. And fifth part is going to be how I review. So let's get started. Okay, so what is Anki? Basically how it works is Anki has been written in such a way that it uses this concept called spaced repetition. It repeatedly shows you flashcards, and it will show you things that you have a harder time memorizing more often. Things you have an easier time memorizing, it will show you less often. This is based off of the forgetting curve. So in psychology, when you are introduced to a topic, your ability to remember the topic is sort of up here. And then as time progresses, if you are not exposed to the topic, your ability to remember it slowly kind of decreases. However, what spaced repetition does is it consistently reintroduces the topic. So you're here, you start to forget, and then you have the flashcard again, you see it again, and then you start to forget, and then you see it again, and you start to forget. And over time, the rate at which you forget things gets less steep, so it slows down and you're able to remember things for longer while having less exposure. Hopefully that made sense. So what you do is you make flashcards, or you download a deck of flashcards and you go through them, and when you see a card you respond to the answer as being easy, medium, or hard. And based on how many times you've seen the card and based on how hard you rank the card, the software will determine when it will next show you the card. Alright, so section 2, why Anki? Well, that is a good question. There are many different software, different apps out there that do similar things to Anki or completely different things from Anki, but Anki tends to be sort of a leader in terms of people that are in disciplines such as medicine that are very memorization heavy. And I think because it is so common in medicine, that's why I chose it. Because you can share decks, you can download decks, and they're only compatible within the Anki software. So by using the most popular software, I'm also giving myself access to the most decks and most collaboration. The other, I think, leader in flashcard software would be Quizlet, and I use Quizlet, but I tend to use Anki more because Anki uses spaced repetition. Quizlet has different features, and I think Quizlet is a lot more user-friendly than Anki, but the science behind helping you memorize isn't as solid as the science that has been put behind Anki. Third reason why I use Anki is because it's free. So yeah, that's basically why I chose Anki. The science behind it, the fact that it is most popular, and the fact that it is free. Okay, part 3. Where do I use Anki in my study routine? So when I study, I believe that there's sort of a flow process of things that need to happen in a certain order for your studying to be efficient and effective. First, you have to familiarize yourself with the material. If you've ever read a paper or a lecture on something you know nothing about, you'll probably notice that if you try to read a sentence, you can't actually understand what the sentence is trying to convey because there's a whole bunch of terms and vocabulary that you don't understand. So familiarization is just getting to that point where you are literate within a certain specialty. So once that is completed, second part is to learn the material. So this is drawing patterns, coming to conclusions, and sort of synthesizing all the information you've received. I think that the lecture is a great time to familiarize yourself and start the learning process. And then when you start studying outside of lecture, that's sort of where you solidify and finish the learning process. After learning, the next part is understanding. Kind of goes hand in hand, but you really want to make sure that you understand the concepts. I find that for myself, I'm not really strict with myself. I'll read something and I'll be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But if I actually think about it or I try to create a test question for myself on the topic, I'm like, wait a minute.
I don't actually understand what's going on.
After that, you can move on to memorization. This is where Anki comes in. So after you understand the information, you're able to filter out what is important, what is not important, what is redundant. And also, if you truly understand the information, you'll be able to filter out stuff that you can reason through on a test, as well as identify things that you just have to straight up remember. After that, you can make your Anki flashcards. If you make your flashcards before this step, a bunch of things will go wrong. One, you're going to create a ton of unnecessary cards. You're going to be trying to memorize things that you don't understand, and you're essentially just going to waste your time. And as powerful as Anki is, you're not going to be able to remember it if you don't actually understand it. Trust me, I've tried. Second thing that'll happen is you'll have too many cards to review, so you actually won't review everything, if that makes sense. And the fact of the matter is, you could chop out a ton of those cards by finding patterns, redundancy, and actually taking the time to understand the information. So that's why I think it is so important to use Anki in the memorization step alone. Anki is not a teaching tool, it is a memorization tool, and I found that if I made a card on something that I didn't understand or didn't bother to learn, I would just end up actually skipping it, because it's just too hard to go to the effort when you're trying to get through 500 cards to understand this one card. The other catch about Anki when you're using it in your study routine is you have to do it every single day. It's kind of like flossing. If you want the oral hygiene benefits, you have to floss every day. And if it's not every day, it has to be on a fairly regular basis, say 5-6 times a week. If you don't, it doesn't really work. Same with Anki, you have to use it regularly, otherwise you're just going to end up forgetting, and on that forgetting curve that I described earlier, you're just not going to be in the right place in relation to time and forgetting for the Anki software to work most effectively. So how do I make my Anki cards? The real question. Little disclaimer before this, I think you should combine multiple methods of how people make their cards and just find what works for you. I'm a very visual person, so that really dictates how I design my cards. I'm also a pretty artsy person, so that also contributes to the design of my cards. Don't try and force something that's inefficient for you or doesn't work, but this is how I do it. I have 3 main types of cards. One is straight up facts. These are things that I can't really reason out, or they're arbitrary numbers, and they're just things that you have to memorize, and they're also short 1 word or 1 number answers. And these are what I call my basic cards. So for these straight up facts, I'll have on the front what is the lab value for this? And then on the back it'll be a number. And that's really easy, it's nice and short, nice and sweet, and Anki will help me memorize these sort of, in my opinion, random facts. Second type of card is going to be images and diagrams. So there is a wonderful, wonderful tool in Anki, it's called image occlusion, where basically you can have a labeled diagram and you can white out the labels, and then each part of the label that you've blocked out becomes a flashcard and it tests you on that. So that is really useful for things like anatomy, histology, or radiology. The third and final type of card that I make are lists of things. So in medical school, there's often lists of either physical symptoms, clinical signs, comorbidities, risk factors, etc. for a certain disease. So a lecturer might say, what are the 10 risk factors to hypertension? There's a lot more than 10, but the people who write my lectures also write my exams, so I'm going to remember the 10 that they told me, and I'm going to make a list on my flashcard. So front of the flashcard on Anki is going to say, what are the 10 risk factors of hypertension? And then I'm going to list them 1 to 10. and you want to be strategic in how you form your list. So I always remember things in the same order every time, because by doing so, the encoding of the memory is stronger. In addition to writing a list in a certain order and categorizing them into patterns, what I do is I draw a diagram that represents this list. So if you've ever heard of Sketchy Medical, it's a very popular resource. I personally don't use it. I don't think that the curriculum at my school is set up very well to be complemented by Sketchy, but I have heard really good things about it. What they do is they draw diagrams of a disease process, and it's basically a visual mnemonic to remember certain things. So I basically create like the cheapo original version of this on my flashcard. So what I like to do is either just draw like a picture, and each thing on the list is represented by the photo, or I'll draw a stick man and he'll have all like the symptoms on his body that are related to a disease, so that when I have to go back and remember, I can just kind of scan the stick man head to toe and remember what physical ailments were present for a certain disease. Okay, so the last and final section is on how I review. So like I said earlier, in order for Anki to work, you unfortunately have to review every single day. So what I do not do, because this is torture, I don't set aside like an hour every day to go through my Anki flashcards. Because let's be real, sitting in front of your laptop or sitting on your phone and clicking through flashcards is boring. It is so boring. I cannot do it. I get distracted. I don't have the discipline to go through things that I don't know and force my brain to memorize things that it doesn't want to remember. It's like the app isn't colorful. It's just black writing on a gray background. Like, it couldn't get any worse. So if you're the kind of person that can sit down and power through Anki flashcards for hours, good for you. But if I'm going to sit down for an hour, I would way rather work my way through a lecture or write out diagrams that synthesize the information that I'm learning. I don't want to sit and click through Anki cards. What you want to do is review Anki cards when it doesn't feel like a chore, but in times when you would just naturally pull out your phone. So just think of all the times when you're like scrolling Instagram. Instagram's not that interesting. It's kind of boring. You're on your phone. You're not really enhancing your life. When you pull out your phone, instead of going to Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, whatever, just pull up your Anki and review your cards. Disclaimer, this is like exam cram time when I'm like a month away from the exam, when I'm realizing I know nothing. This is when I do this. Like, I have a life. It's summer now. I don't do Anki cards in my spare time, don't worry. So examples of times when I will whip out my Anki to do review is between lectures, when I am waiting at the bus stop, when I'm commuting, riding on the bus or in a car, when I'm on the toilet, before I go to bed, when I wake up in the morning. Those are like the best times. And you know, if there's like 5 or 6 times throughout the day that you just kind of have like 10 minutes and you're waiting around doing nothing and you get through like 20 cards, by the end of the day you've done 100 cards. One thing that I do not do is put big concepts onto one card, because the reality is you are not going to review that card. If I come across a card that's like, explain diabetes, I'm gonna be like,
Insulin, pancreas, blood sugar, too high, bad things happen, next card.
and like, there's so much more to diabetes than what I just said, but my lazy self is gonna be like, I wanna get through cards, let's go. So by having a bunch of shorter cards, you can just kind of lightning round, rapid fire, get through those cards, increase the volume of knowledge, and then more stuff can get into your brain. The whole idea of like, explain the concept of diabetes, I think that's really important and very important in learning and memorizing things, but I don't think Anki is the place for it. I think that should be something separate outside of your revision that's associated with Anki. So you could do that process and say, okay, I'm going to explain diabetes, and you do it on the whiteboard, or you do it with a friend, and then based on that process, you can select certain bits. If you were like, okay, I forgot the receptor in this aspect, you can put that on an Anki card. Or you could be like, I forgot the 5 risk factors, or like the demographic. You this entire concept, and then when you go to explain it again outside of Anki, Anki will have helped you remember all of those fine details. Anyways, that is the end of the How I Use Anki video. Just kidding, it is not quite the end. As promised, here is the screen recording of how I use Anki. So step one, you want to download Anki. It is free. You just want to go to the website here and download the latest version for the appropriate computer that you have. So once you open the Anki app, you're going to want to go to the very bottom of your screen, click Create Deck, and name the deck. So here I'm going to title this How I Use Anki. And then you'll see it show up on your list of decks. And if you click Add, you can add a new card. So here we're going to use basic. This is things I use for short sort of one-word answers on the back. So here you can see at the front, you've got a text box. So this is what you'll be prompted with. And then the back is your answer. I'm not actually making medical school cards here. I'm just using this as an opportunity to remind you that I have an Instagram account and that you should maybe consider following me. Once you're done, you can click Add or use the keyboard shortcut Command Enter. Another thing that I like to do with the basic card option is create lists of things that I'm supposed to remember. I spoke about this a little earlier in the video, but basically on the answer side, I like to number the things that I'm remembering, and I like to recall them in that same order each time because that improves your ability to remember them. After I've made a list, if I find it a bit too hard to remember or I want a visual aid, I then go on to my iPad and I make a doodle that represents this list. And once I've made the doodle, I screenshot it off of my iPad and then I crop the screenshot just to include what I need. And with this screenshot, I will airdrop it to my MacBook. Once it's been airdropped, it will show up in my downloads folder. And from the downloads folder, I can drag and drop it, or I can copy and paste it into the back of the flashcard. So the other great option Anki has is the close card. This is basically a fill in the blank card. So you write out a statement, and then when you come across the word that you want to blank out, you want to do 2 curly brackets, C1, which means close one, and then 2 colons, and then the word that you're trying to blank out. If you click on this icon in the top right, you can do image occlusion, so you just choose the image that you want to blank out. This is perfect for diagrams, or again reminding you to please subscribe to my channel. I'm just going to ignore this update, and basically what you can do is blank out with the square tool any labels, and this becomes a flashcard. And you can blank out multiple things in the photo so that you have to remember multiple labels. And then at the bottom, you can hide all, reveal one, hide all, reveal all, or hide one, reveal all. So I like to use the hide all, reveal one because it tests you on each specific blank separately. So once you're ready, click Study Now, and the red is what you're being tested on. Once you have your answer in your head, click Show Answer. And if you found it easy, you can have it show you the card again in 4 days. If it was harder, you can have Anki show it to you again in a minute. So this is another example of the basic card. It shows you the list as well as the image that you imported. And again, you can rank it as easy, medium, or hard. This is the close card, and as you can see, the blank is in blue. And the basic card, again, is just like a one-word answer on the back. So that is basically how I use Anki. There's lots of other options, but the cards that I showed you today are the ones that I use basically for everything, and I tend to make them on my computer just because it's easier with the keyboard than trying to do this on the iPad or the phone. Anyways, that is the end of the How I Use Anki video. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up, comment below, and if you have any other video ideas, I would be happy to accommodate that. Just let me know down in the comments below.